Is that thing even legal to fire on a modern range? The laughter started with Staff Sergeant Vic Prudhomme and radiated outward the way laughter does when it has a target and the target is not in a position to push back. Prudhomme was 31 years old, 6 years in Army marksmanship instruction. And he stood with one boot propped on the range bench and his arms folded, and his eyes on the rifle in the old man's hands, with the bright amusement of a man who has found something genuinely funny and intends to spend it. The rifle was the kind of funny that required no embellishment. It was a Springfield M1903. Its stock the color of old tea, its barrel showing the dark, finely pebbled surface of metal that had been maintained over many decades with patience rather than product. The action was smooth and the bore was clean. The old man had been particular about those things since before Prudhomme was born. But it was also, objectively, a rifle built in a century that had concluded, and it was sitting in a lane at the Fort Benning Advanced Marksmanship Facility in the year that it was, and the contrast was not subtle. The old man holding it was named Franklin Birch. He was 82 years old. He wore a plain brown canvas jacket over a faded blue work shirt, and dark trousers, and boots that had been resoled and wore their age without apology, and a gray wool cap pulled low against the October cold that was finding its way through the range's open downrange end. He was not tall. His shoulders had the slight forward curve of someone who had spent decades at a bench or a prone position or a workbench. The professional rounding of sustained precision. His hands on the rifle were broad and thick-fingered and scarred, and they held the M1903 with the easy authority of hands that had always known how to hold it. He had not reacted to the laughter. He was looking downrange at the 100-yard target with the specific quality of attention a man gives a problem he is in no hurry to solve. "Sir." Prudhomme said it the way people say "sir" when they mean the opposite, a vocative that carries the weight of what it replaces. "I'm going to need you to sign an additional liability waiver before you fire that." Facility rules. Anything pre-1950, there's a specific form. There was no such form. The two other instructors, Sergeant First Class Colton Webb, 28, and Staff Sergeant Yolanda Faris, 26, were at the scoring station behind Prudhomme, and Faris was looking at her tablet with the expression of someone who knows a performance is happening and has made a decision about whether to be part of the audience. The range facility was state-of-the-art, digital scoring, climate-controlled bays, a wall of every modern optic available for instructor use. The air smelled sharper and more chemical than the old brass and mineral oil ranges Franklin Birch had learned on. Downrange, through the open bays, the October morning was a flat gray sky above red Georgia clay and the dark tree line of the post's outer boundary. Franklin Birch turned and looked at Prudhomme. His eyes were brown, a deep amber brown, and they carried a stillness that had nothing to do with age. The stillness of a man who had arrived, some decades ago, at a settled understanding of what things were worth reacting to and had organized his life accordingly. Not hostile, not warm, simply present, the way a deep river is present, the surface telling you nothing about the current underneath. "There's no form," Franklin said. His voice was low and even, a dry weight to it. The voice of someone who has stopped using more words than necessary. Prudhomme held the expression for a beat, then let the grin do the work. "Humor me. I'd rather shoot," Franklin said. "The thing fires a rimless .3006 cartridge," Webb said from the scoring station, with the precision of someone who knows his history but is deploying it in the service of the room's direction rather than its accuracy. "Trajectory characteristics are entirely different from any modern, I know what it fires," Franklin said. He looked at Webb with the same brown-amber stillness. "I've been loading it for 60 years. A beat. 60 years, Prudhomme said. He turned to his audience, a class of 12 advanced qualification candidates seated in the instruction bay behind the range, here for a 2-day marksmanship seminar, watching the entire exchange with the attention of people who understand that what is happening in front of them is not part of the curriculum, but is probably more instructive. 60 years with the same rifle. What does that tell you about adaptability? The class did not respond. Several of them were looking at the rifle. Several were looking at Franklin Birch. A few were doing the thing where they looked at neither and hoped not to be called on. Prudhomme turned back. He picked up a modern AR platform rifle from the bench beside him, the facility's demonstration model, the kind that took 5 minutes to configure for any shooter on the planet and had a ballistic computer integrated into the optic that calculated wind, temperature, humidity, and the emotional state of the target. He held it out toward Franklin. "Here," he said. "Try this. We'll see what your fundamentals actually are, stripped of 70 years of compensating for an antique." Franklin Birch looked at the rifle. He looked at Prudhomme. "I'm fine with mine," he said. "I'm sure you are." Prudhomme set it down. "All right, 1 round. Show me what 60 years gets you." He gestured at the 100-yard target, standard silhouette. 1 round. Franklin Birch turned back to the lane. He settled into his stance with the precise economy of someone who stopped thinking about stance a long time ago because the body already knew. Left hand under the fore end, right hand at the grip, his thumb along the stock rather than around it the way a different grip teaches, the rifle coming to his shoulder with the fit of something that had been there 10,000 times before. He closed his left eye. He breathed out. His right eye, behind the iron rear sight, a simple aperture, no glass, no computation, found the front blade and walked it to the target with the unhurried patience of a man who is not performing for anyone and has never needed to. He squeezed. The M1903 fired with a sound that was different from the modern rifles, fuller, with a broader authority to the report. A sound that the range's acoustic panels were calibrated for a different era of weapon and did not quite absorb. The brass ejected. Franklin Birch cycled the bolt and stood at rest, his hand still on the rifle, waiting, downrange. The scoring system registered the hit. Prudhomme looked at the tablet Ferris held. His face went briefly neutral, the flat recalibration of a man who expected one number and received another. Center ring. 1 round, Webb said, and his voice had shifted. Not dramatically, but shifted. Lucky, Prudhomme said. Franklin Birch said nothing. That's not a repeatable result with that platform. The sight geometry alone introduces, "Would you like me to do it again?" Franklin said, quiet. No edge in it. Prudhomme looked at him. He looked at the tablet. He looked at the class behind him. 12 advanced candidates who were watching the exchange the way people watch things they will file away and think about later. 5 rounds, Prudhomme said. "Show me a group." Franklin Birch reached into the jacket pocket and withdrew 5 rounds and lined them on the bench edge with the same unhurried precision he applied to everything, and he shot a group at 100 yards that Prudhomme's tablet described when Ferris handed it to him as .78 MOA. Prudhomme held the tablet for a moment. .78. With iron sights, with an 82-year-old shooter, with a rifle that had been manufactured before any of the equations the modern range's software was built on had been written down. He handed the tablet back. He straightened. "Push it out," he said. 200 yards. Franklin Birch shot 200 yards with iron sights, and the group was 1.1 MOA. And the class had stopped pretending to look at other things. 300, Prudhomme said. Franklin shot 300 yards. 1.4. Every round in the black. Ferris had set down her tablet and was simply watching. Prudhomme walked to the firing line. He stood beside Franklin Birch and looked downrange at the 300-yard target. And he was quiet for a moment, in the way that people are quiet when they are renegotiating something internally. "That's a good group," he said. He said it carefully, the way a man seeds ground when he has chosen the ground and is paying the cost of having chosen it. Franklin said. "But here's the thing," and Prudhomme's voice had changed again, not recovered its earlier register, but found a new one, flatter and more professional, the voice of an instructor reclaiming his lecture. "What you just did, that's consistency. That's practice. What we're teaching here is adaptability, the ability to perform with any platform, any optic, in any conditions. What you've demonstrated is mastery of one very specific tool." He looked at the rifle, a tool that doesn't translate. You put down that rifle tomorrow and pick up anything else on this range, and 60 years of muscle memory is working against you. That's not an advantage. That's a liability. He looked at the class. "That's actually the lesson here," he said. Specialization versus adaptability. The modern shooter has to be platform agnostic, has to be able to. "Hand me the AR," Franklin said. Prudhomme stopped. Franklin had not turned from the target. He was looking downrange at the 300-yard silhouette with the same unhurried quality of attention. "The demonstration model. Hand it to me." Prudhomme looked at the rifle on the bench. He looked at Franklin. He picked up the AR platform demonstration model and held it out. Franklin Birch set the M1903 on the bench with care and picked up the AR. He held it for a moment, running his hands along the receiver, the stock, the integrated optic. He checked the chamber. He adjusted the stock length with the push of a button, 3 clicks, measured, and pressed the cheek weld and looked through the glass. He fired a 5-round group at 300 yards, 1.1 MOA. The class behind the instruction bay was completely, absolutely still. Prudhomme looked at the tablet. He did not speak. Franklin set the AR on the bench and picked up the M1903 and looked at Prudhomme. "I've been shooting since I was 14 years old," he said, in the same even, dry, weight-bearing voice. "A rifle is a rifle. The fundamentals don't change with the platform. Breath, trigger, follow through. Everything else is accounting." He paused. "You're right that I have 60 years with this one. I have 60 years with everything else too. I just prefer the feel of something with history in it." Prudhomme was quiet. Then, from somewhere behind the scoring station, from the direction of the observation window that ran along the back of the range's instructor module, the window that looked into the senior staff corridor, came a sound. A door. Sergeant First Class Yolanda Ferris had not made the call to the senior staff corridor. She had thought about it, standing at the scoring station with the tablet in her hands and the numbers on the screen. And she had looked at Prudhomme and looked at the old man and looked at the M1903. And she had put the tablet down and taken out her personal phone and called someone who was not in this building. Her grandfather had served. Her grandfather had a photograph on his kitchen wall, a young man in fatigues on a range that looked nothing like this one, and her grandfather had a name he mentioned sometimes, a name said in the specific register of very few names, and when she had recognized the rifle, the particular stock, the particular surface oxidation pattern, the way it came to the shoulder. She had gone still for a moment and then stepped quietly to the far end of the scoring station. The phone rang twice. "Grandpa," she said, "I need you to tell me something. The man you used to talk about, the one from the marksmanship program, the one who wrote the manual before Colonel Decker rewrote it, Was his name Franklin Birch? A silence. Not long. 3 seconds. Yolanda, her grandfather said, and his voice had changed in the 3 seconds the way voices change when something unexpected has surfaced from a long time ago. Why are you asking me that right now? Because he's standing 20 feet away from me shooting a Springfield .03 at 300 yards iron sights, and his group is 1.4 MOA. Another silence. Is Sergeant Major Hendricks still the senior marksmanship NCO at Benning? He's the chief of the advanced marksmanship facility, Grandpa call him, her grandfather said. Right now. Use my name. Tell him Franklin Birch is on his range. She called. Sergeant Major Clifford Hendricks picked up on the first ring, which was not how sergeant majors generally answered phones from staff sergeants. But the name she led with was her grandfather's name, and the name she said second was Franklin Birch. And the pause that followed was the kind of pause that a room creates when something has changed the weight of the air in it. Say that name again, Hendricks said. Franklin Birch, Sergeant Major. He's in lane 12 of the advanced facility. He's been here about 40 minutes. He's been here 40. A sound of movement. Is he all right? He's shooting, Sergeant Major. He's shooting very well. Who's the range instructor? Staff Sergeant Prudhomme. A pause shorter than the others but denser. Tell Prudhomme I said to extend the session. Do not let that man leave. I'm on my way. The line went dead. Ferris put her phone back in her pocket. She looked at the range, at Prudhomme's back, at the old man at lane 12 standing with the M1903 cradled in his arms and looking downrange with the patient quality of someone in no hurry to be anywhere else. She picked up her tablet. She waited. 8 minutes later, the door at the back of the instruction bay opened. Not the main range door. The senior staff door, the one that connected the range to the facility's administrative corridor, the one that had a keypad entry and that junior instructors did not use. Sergeant Major Clifford Hendricks came through it. He was 60 years old, 38 years in Army marksmanship, the kind of man whose presence in a room changes the room's atmospheric pressure without any particular effort on his part. Behind him came 2 lieutenant colonels. Behind them, moving with the measured authority of someone who had been interrupted from something important and had immediately agreed that this was more important, came Major General Paul Strickland, commanding general of the infantry center, in a service uniform that had the particular crispness of a man who had been told 45 minutes ago that his presence was required somewhere and had taken 8 of those minutes to change. Prudhomme saw the rank first. He came to attention so fast he nearly stepped into his own lane. None of the arriving party looked at Prudhomme. Hendricks walked the length of the range to lane 12. The 12 advanced qualification candidates in the instruction bay had come to attention. The room had gone to the specific silence of a space that understands, without being told, that what is happening in it is not routine. Hendricks stopped at the lane. Franklin Birch heard the footsteps and turned. They looked at each other for a moment. Hendricks's face did the thing that faces do when they have been looking for something for a long time and have found it in an unexpected place. The small, complete shift of a man setting down a weight he had been carrying in a place he did not know he was carrying it. He came to attention. The salute was the sharpest, most breathtakingly precise thing Vic Prudhomme had ever witnessed. Rendered by a 38-year sergeant major of the Army's marksmanship program, held without wavering at the count of 3, directed at an 82-year-old man in a brown canvas jacket and a gray wool cap with a Springfield M1903, cradled in the crook of his arm. Both lieutenant colonels came to attention. Major General Strickland came to attention. In the instruction bay, 12 advanced candidates came to attention, and several of them did not entirely understand why, which is the truest form of the reflex. the body responding to something it recognizes before the mind has named it. Franklin Birch returned the salute with his right hand, the M1903 shifting to his left arm to free it, and the return was clean and deliberate and unhurried. And when his arm came down, Hendricks took his hand. "You weren't going to call anyone," Hendricks said. "It was not a question." "I was going to shoot," Franklin said. "How long have you been coming to this range?" Franklin thought about it. "Since it was built. And before that?" "The old one. East side of Post." Hendricks shook his head once. He turned. Major General Strickland stepped forward. He looked at the range, at the 12 candidates, at Prudhomme standing at attention with the expression of a man reassessing the last 40 minutes of his life. "At ease," the general said. The room exhaled. "Sergeant Major Birch," he began, and the rank and name together had a weight that the range absorbed. United States Army, retired, Master Gunner and Chief Marksmanship Instructor, Infantry School, Fort Benning, 1971 to 1994. He let that date span settle. 23 years, 2 tours in Vietnam. The Distinguished Service Medal, the Legion of Merit, the Bronze Star with Valor device. He looked at the M1903 on the bench. Sergeant Major Birch is the author of the Army's Advanced Marksmanship Fundamentals Manual, the document that every instructor in this facility was certified from. He paused. The document that the curriculum in this room is built on. He looked at Prudhomme. The specific lesson you were teaching 30 minutes ago. Platform agnostic fundamentals. Breath, trigger, follow through as the stable core beneath any equipment variation. That framework. He wrote it. In 1979, the room held its breath. Sergeant Major Birch also holds the long-range accuracy record for this facility's predecessor range, set in 1988, never broken, and, as of this morning, holds the current facility record at 300 yards, iron sights, bolt action. Strickland looked at the scoring tablet that Ferris was holding. 1.4 MOA. I am told that is also what he shot with the AR platform demonstration model, for comparison. He looked at Prudhomme. "Staff Sergeant Prudhomme," he said. "Sir, the lesson you were teaching this morning, about fundamentals not changing with the platform, about breath and trigger and follow through as the foundation under every variable. That is correct. That is exactly right." He let it rest for a moment. "Now you know where it came from." After the general and the colonels had moved to the facility commander's office, and after the class of 12 had been dismissed to lunch with the specific charged quiet of people who have witnessed something they will talk about for the rest of their careers, Vic Prudhomme stood alone at the scoring station. Franklin Birch was at lane 12, breaking down the M1903 for transport, methodical, unhurried, the care of a man who respected the instrument. He worked without looking at Prudhomme. He did not require Prudhomme's attention and was not auditioning for it. Prudhomme walked the 3 lanes. He stopped beside the bench. He did not say anything for a moment. Franklin Birch ran a bore brush through the barrel with the focused calm of a man who had done this 10,000 times and found it worth doing correctly every single time. "The form," Prudhomme said. "There's no form." "No," Franklin said. He did not look up from the barrel. "I knew there wasn't. He stopped." "I know," Franklin said. Prudhomme was quiet. "Then, I've been teaching the manual for 4 years. I know every section of it. I never looked up who wrote it." Franklin Birch set the bore brush down and looked at him. Those amber brown eyes, the settled depth. "Most people don't," he said. "That's all right. You teach it correctly. That's what matters." He picked up the cleaning cloth. "The manual isn't mine anymore. It belongs to whoever's using it." He paused. "That's what writing something down is for. He ran the cloth along the stock, checking the wood. "Your group at 200 yards this morning," he said. "Before I got here." Ferris showed me the log. Prudhomme looked at him. 1.9 MOA, Franklin said. "That's a good group. Better than most of the people who come through here." He set the cloth down. "Your left elbow drops on round 4. Not much. But it drops. If you fix that, you'll get it under 1.5. Prudhomme stared at him. "How did you?" "I was watching the line when I came in," Franklin said simply. He finished the cleaning. He returned the rifle to its case, the buckles secured with the same care as everything else, and he shouldered the case and picked up the canvas bag and turned to go. At the range door, he stopped. He looked back at Prudhomme. "The rifle is 73 years old," he said. "I'm 82. Neither of us is what we were." He looked down at the case. "But the work is the same work. The breath is the same breath. The trigger is the same trigger." He paused. "If you can do it with this, you can do it with anything. That's what the manual says. On page 1. He pushed through the door. The October morning received him. The flat gray sky, the red Georgia clay, the smell of cold air and pine resin, and the distant mechanical sounds of a military post in the middle of its day. And then the door swung shut, and he was gone. And the range was just a range again, though it took a while for it to feel like one. About 9 weeks later, Sergeant First Class Yolanda Ferris was at the East Range early, running her own qualification before the morning session. She had been at the East Range 2 mornings a week since October. Iron sights, no glass, working the fundamentals at distances the qualification didn't require. She had told Prudhomme she was doing it, and Prudhomme had said he knew, because he had been there at 0530, the 2 mornings before she started, doing the same thing. She was on her 3rd group at 200 yards when the door at the far end of the range opened. Franklin Birch came in with the rifle case over his shoulder and the canvas bag in his left hand, wearing the same brown canvas jacket and the gray wool cap, and he stopped when he saw her and looked at the target downrange and then at her. "Ferris," he said. "Sergeant Major," she said. He set down the canvas bag. He looked at her target, the group visible from where he stood, tight enough to tell the story without the spotting scope. "Your grandfather teach you to shoot?" he said. "He tried," she said. "I didn't listen until I was older." Franklin made the sound that lived next to a laugh. He took the rifle from the case and set it on the adjacent bench. "What's your weak point?" "Wind calls," she said. "I second-guess myself." He nodded slowly. He looked downrange. "You feel the doubt before the shot or after?" "Before," she said. "Then you're not second-guessing yourself," he said. "You're reading. The doubt is the read. You just haven't learned to trust it yet." He settled the M1903 to his shoulder and looked at the 200-yard target through the iron aperture. "Call the wind." Ferris looked at the range flags. She looked at the mirage pattern through her spotting scope. She said what she thought. He fired. She was right. They shot until 0730, and Franklin Birch spoke when the shooting required it and was quiet when it didn't. And the range held the particular piece of a place being used correctly by people who know what it is for. There are men who gave the best of what they knew not to the record books, but to the documents, the manuals, the frameworks, the foundational texts that the next generation trains from, and the generation after that, and the generation that does not yet know those texts exist. These men do not put their names on the cover. They put their names on the work, and the work goes into the world and becomes the standard, and they return sometimes to ranges that were built from that standard, in the October cold, to check the targets and do the work again, because the work is worth doing correctly, regardless of who is watching. And it always has been. If you were moved by Franklin Birch's story of quiet courage and timeless wisdom, hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to see it, and be sure to subscribe to Veterans Valor for more stories of America's unassuming heroes.